Today, a school bus stops at the end of the driveway. In 1900 America, school began after the cows were fed, the fire was lit, and the work of survival was done. At the turn of the 20th century, in rural America, childhood was not divided neatly between play and education. It was divided between necessity and exhaustion. For a young farm girl growing up in the countryside around 1900, each day began long before the sun rose and often ended before any lesson book could be opened. Her world was quiet, wide, and demanding. She lived on a small farm miles from the nearest town, surrounded by fields that changed color with the seasons, brown with frost, green with spring, golden with harvest. The land fed her family, but it also consumed their time. There were no machines to ease the work, no electricity to shorten the night. Every task depended on human hands, and those hands included hers. She woke before dawn to the sound of her mother moving about the kitchen, stoking the wood stove, boiling water for coffee. The girl dressed quickly in stiff, mended clothes, her fingers numb in winter, dusty in summer. Before school was even a possibility, there were chores to complete. Chickens needed feeding. Eggs had to be gathered carefully so none were wasted. Water was carried from the well, bucket by heavy bucket. If the family owned a cow, she helped with the milking, learning early that patience mattered more than strength. Only after the morning labor was finished could she think about school. School, for her, was not a building with hallways and bells. It was a one-room schoolhouse several miles away, reachable only by foot. There was no bus. There was no guarantee the school would even be open. Attendance depended on weather, farm demands, and whether the teacher had been paid enough to stay. She walked the dirt roads with books tied together by string, shoes often worn thin or missing entirely in warmer months. In winter, snow soaked her skirts. In spring, mud pulled at her feet. She walked alongside other children when possible, though many days she walked alone, rehearsing lessons in her head so she wouldn't forget them by the time she arrived. Inside the schoolhouse, students of all ages sat together. Younger children practiced letters, while older ones studied arithmetic or geography. The teacher, often a young woman only a few years older than her oldest students, managed everything: lessons, discipline, cleaning, and sometimes even heating the room. The girl loved school, not because it was easy, but because it was different. Books offered worlds beyond the farm. She learned about cities with electric lights, about oceans she had never seen, about women who wrote, taught, and traveled. She learned to write her name carefully, then sentences, then paragraphs. Writing felt like freedom, a quiet rebellion against the limits of her surroundings. But school competed constantly with survival. During planting season, she missed weeks at a time. During harvest, sometimes months. Her parents valued education, but they valued food more. If hands were needed in the fields, school waited. Always. At home, she studied by lamplight when she could. Kerosene was expensive, so the flame stayed low. Her eyes strained as she traced words on the page. She memorized lessons instead of rereading them, knowing that time and light were borrowed luxuries. Her mother encouraged her quietly. "Learn what you can," she would say, pressing a hand into her daughter's hair. Her father was practical. Education was admirable, but land did not farm itself. Still, even he noticed how quickly she learned, how carefully she listened. In 1900 America, rural education lagged far behind urban schools. Many farming communities saw education as seasonal, optional, or secondary. Girls, especially, were expected to prepare for domestic life. Reading was useful. Writing was acceptable. Ambition was suspicious. Yet the girl persisted. She noticed patterns others overlooked. She understood weather, soil, and animals intuitively, then applied that understanding to numbers and words. She kept scraps of paper where she wrote thoughts, questions, and dreams, tiny acts of defiance against a life already planned for her. Some winters, school closed entirely. Teachers left for better opportunities, funding disappeared. When that happened, the girl taught herself, using whatever books she could borrow or salvage. She read aloud to her younger siblings, turning chores into lessons, turning necessity into opportunity. She did not dream loudly. She did not announce ambitions. Rural girls learned early that wanting too much could invite disappointment. Instead, she dreamed quietly, steadily, the way crops grow underground before anyone sees green. As she grew older, expectations tightened. Her labor became more valuable. Marriage was discussed casually, as if it were inevitable. Education began to feel fragile, temporary, like something that could be taken away at any moment. But history was shifting. Across America, reformers were beginning to argue for compulsory education. Women were organizing. Newspapers discussed progress, opportunity, and the future. These ideas reached rural areas slowly, but they reached them nonetheless. The girl's persistence paid off in small, meaningful ways. A teacher noticed her ability and recommended her for further study. A local minister lent her books. A neighbor helped her apply for a teaching certificate, one of the few respectable professions available to educated women at the time. Each step forward required negotiation, sacrifice, and resilience. She never forgot the mornings spent milking cows before sunrise. She never forgot walking miles with frozen hands just to sit at a wooden desk. Those experiences shaped her understanding of education not as entitlement, but as earned possibility. By the time she became a teacher herself, she carried her past with her into the classroom. She understood the students who arrived late, tired, or unprepared. She knew what it cost them to be there. Her life did not make headlines, her name did not enter history books, but her struggle represented millions of rural American girls whose education depended on grit rather than convenience. Today, school begins with backpacks and schedules. In 1900, it began with survival. And because girls like her refused to give up on learning, the world slowly changed.